Welcome back! If you watched It's Easy to Make Your Own Game in 2025 Parts 1 and 2, and you are targeting Steam for your game's platform, then we need to consider the requirements for getting that Steam store page approved. Steam requires a minimum of 5 gameplay screenshots before your Steam store page can be approved to go live to the public. Steam requires that these screenshots be reflective of the gameplay. Steam also states that you are not supposed to use cinematics for these screenshots. However, since Rescue is in the early stages of development, I plan to use Unity 6's cinematic tools to mock up some temporary screenshots, but I want to make sure that they are reflective of the gameplay. Then I will replace these screenshots with actual gameplay as soon as possible. So for today's video, I will cover some simple post-processing, setting up the Unity editor for animation, and using a few free Unity assets to get started. For now, I plan to start with Rescue. Rescue is a 3D, low-poly, supernatural thriller. It'll be an action RPG with third-person shooter features. Rescue uses Cinti assets, and Cinti provides some great demo scenes so I can get up and running quickly for these temporary screenshots. For today, I'm going to use a few free assets. I'll put the links below, and I'm just going to mock up something really quickly to get through the process, and then I will eventually tweak this for my actual screenshots because Rescue will be gun-centric. It'll use some magic too, but I want my screenshots to predominantly be with guns. Okay, so as I said, I'll be using Cinti for this project for Rescue, and it is a supernatural thriller, so I'm going to choose a demo scene from the Horror Mansion package by Cinti. Anytime I use a purchased asset that I'm going to change or modify for my needs, I do not like to use the original, so I'm going to hit Control D, make a duplicate of this scene, rename it, and then I'm going to drag it into my sandbox folder. This way, when Cinti does their updates, I can load those updates without overwriting any of the changes that I've made. So the first thing I'm going to do is drag in my character, my player character prefab. I created this in video 1 and 2. So you can go back and look at that if you care to see how I modified her and created the prefab. So I'm going to position her where I want her for this first screenshot of playing around with this animation. One thing I like to do is organize my project. So I'm going to hit Create Empty and create an empty game object, and then I'm going to name that My Game Objects. Then I'm going to drag my player into this quote-unquote folder. It serves as a folder. Now I'm going to repeat that and make another empty game object and name it Cinti. Then I'm going to drag all of Cinti's game objects from the demo into that folder. Now once I've done that, what I can do is click on this little finger icon beside the Cinti folder, and that will lock all of those items, all of those game objects in the scene view. Now I can click on my player and select my player without accidentally selecting something else. Okie dokie, so let's look at some quick post-processing ideas. The first thing you need to do is click on your main camera in the hierarchy and then go over to the inspector and make sure you check post-processing. This way you can see the post-processing effects as you do them live. Now I'm going to create an empty game object again and name it post-processing. I'm going to select that in the hierarchy and come over to the inspector and reset the transform. I always like to reset the transform to 000. Then I'm going to add a component and add a volume. Now once I've added this volume, I want to make sure that it's global. This way it will affect the whole scene. We can use local later. I'll go into that in a future video. Then I want to add a new profile. Now I'm going to start adding overrides. So I'm going to hit Add Override and go down to Post-Processing, and the first one I'm going to add is Tone Mapping. So tone mapping is the process of remapping your HDR, and you can choose from 3 different properties. whichever one suits your game needs. And as you can see, this made the scene very dark. So the next thing I'm going to do is add another override and use color adjustments. I would do this anyway because I like to add contrast and saturation. Now, from all of my years in photography, I always add a little bit of contrast. It doesn't take much, so less is more. Be careful not to overdo these settings. I'm going to add a little bit of post-exposure to lighten up the effects that occurred when I used the tone mapping. I'm going to add a little bit of contrast, maybe around 1 to start with. And then I'm going to add some saturation. Again, less is more. Be careful not to overdo these settings. And my saturation, I'm going to put it up around maybe 10 to start with. Next, I'm going to add some bloom and set the properties for intensity, smoothness, and scatter. So bloom creates fringes of light around any materials that have emissions properties set for them. And so you can just change your threshold, your intensity, your scatter, or any other of these properties here. You can also add lens dirt. So the next thing I like to do is a vignette, and that will darken or desaturate the edges of the image, and basically that will draw your player's focus to the center of the game. I like to use a dark blue instead of black. It's just a little more subtle, and again, a little bit goes a long way, so be careful with this. I generally start off with setting the intensity about 1. And finally, I'm going to add the white balance. Now for this particular scene, I don't think I'm really going to use white balance, but you can use it to change the temperature and the tint. So if your scene is a little too blue, you can warm it up a bit. If it's too warm or orangey, you can cool it off a little bit. In photography, basically anything that's white in the scene that is supposed to be white, in reality, you would want it to where it was white. So next, it's really important to play test it because as you can see here, the visual effects like the fog and the lighting will change what it looks like. So now I'm play testing in play focused mode so that I can see my hierarchy and select things, and then I can see my inspector and adjust these properties. So I select the post-processing. I can adjust these properties. I can turn them off and on, see what it does, and then make tweaks and get it the way I want it. And then once I have done that, I can exit out of play, and the post-processing adjustments will actually still be saved. So that's a really nice feature. You don't have to remember what you did. You can just adjust it live and then exit out of play, and everything is done. Okie dokie, so let's look at some animation and see if we can get a first screenshot done. So the first thing we need to do is make sure we have all of the Unity packages installed that we will need for the cinematics and the animations. So go to Window, Package Manager, Unity Registry. You can select the Cinematic Studio, which will install 6 of the main packages that you need. Your AI navigation, your input system, if it wasn't automatically installed. For Unity 6, I think it is. Post-processing, if it's not already installed. And you'll need the visual effects graph if you're going to use visual effects that require that. So the next thing I like to do is set up my Unity editor for animation. I'm going to drag my game window down here beside the console. I'm going to change it from free aspect to 16:9 and turn off the low resolution. Then I'm going to click on these three dots over here and I'm going to add animation window, and I'm going to drag that below my inspector because I'm going to be doing more with animation window than I am the inspector for this particular purpose. Now I'm going to go to window, animation, and add my animator, and I'm going to bring that also down here beside the game window. And now I'm ready to go. So I'm going to save this layout and I'm going to name it animation. And now I can switch back and forth between my design window and my animation window. So as you can see, the player already has an animator on it. I'm going to choose an animator controller. I'm going to click this little selector target on the side here. It'll show me all of the controllers I have. I'm going to select a pre-designed controller that was provided by a free asset by Mixamo from Unity's Asset Store. I'll put the link below. This will just get me up and running quickly. I have an avatar. Cinti does that. So the Cinti player is already humanoid rig and it already has an avatar. So I'm going to select my player and I'm going to scrub the timeline on my animation window, and I can see the animation that I've done. If I don't like this animation, then I can change. This one will do for today. I'm going to choose a pose I like. You can lock this animation window, and that way you can select other things in your hierarchy without changing that pose. One thing that will help, I'm going to select my player. I'm going to go up to animation rigging, and I'm going to come down to bone renderer setup. That will add the bone renderer component in the inspector on the player and show the bones in the scene menu. What this will help me do is now in the scene window I can select her hand and it will highlight that in the hierarchy. It will highlight the bone. And I can select my magic effect and drag it onto that hand bone. Once I have dragged the magic orb onto the hand bone on the player, it's not exactly in the right place, so what I'm going to do is go over to the transform and I'm going to position it at 0, 0, 0. And then I'm going to scale it down to maybe 0.5 on the X, Y, and Z. Then I can hit the reset and reset just the position. I can reset the rotation too, but it's a round orb, so it doesn't really matter. I can select the magic orb in the hierarchy and come over to the inspector and see the different properties that can be changed, and then you can just tweak your position, make sure you've got it exactly where you want it in the player's hand. Once you get it positioned the way you want, then just scrub the timeline and see how it looks. Choose a position for your screenshot, and voila, we are done. Pretty cool, right? So of course I'll tweak this and come up with a better screenshot in the future, but that will be for a future video. So for today, thanks for watching. All of those who made it to the end, I appreciate it because it makes YouTube think I'm important and interesting. If you like this channel, like and subscribe. I'll have some more stuff when I have something interesting to show. Bye for now.